Imagine relaxing in a park on a sunny day, when suddenly the skies start to shatter, tearing open a dimensional rift to another plane. This was the grim reality our protagonist, RMC, faced when the supernatural descended upon the ancient city of Lintian. He had been basking in the sun, enjoying the peacefulness of the park, when he opened his eyes to find the world around him disintegrating. Horrors beyond human comprehension erupted from the rift, unleashing chaos and destruction upon the unsuspecting world. No one was spared from the onslaught. In the face of such terror, the only instinct for survival was to flee, run as far and as fast as possible, away from the apocalypse that had seemingly been forgotten by the gods. Unfortunately for RMC, he was a step behind the chaos. While the rest of the city scrambled for their lives, he remained frozen on his park bench, eyes locked on the monstrous entity that had emerged. This was the day the heavens had opened to deliver devastation, a day when unspeakable horrors materialized to haunt the collective nightmares of humanity. The tranquility of the day was obliterated as the monster turned the ground into a molten sea of lava, with buildings and infrastructure crumbling in its wake. Paralyzed by fear, RMC clutched his phone, which was ringing incessantly with a call from someone he affectionately called Baby Xiao Shui. In that apocalyptic moment, with the abyss hungering for everything in sight and the monster drawing ever closer, RMC could think only of one thing. He could not afford to die here. Today, of all days, was meant to be a day of love, not of ruin. The day RMC had been waiting for, the day he was finally going to reunite with his girlfriend after 3 long years, was the day the abyss chose to unleash its fury. Of all the days for the world to end, it picked the most significant day of his life. Their long-anticipated plans were reduced to ashes, consumed along with the bodies of innocent civilians. As the inferno roared around him, searing his skin and turning his flesh and bones to cinders, regret was the last thought on his mind. So many questions remained unanswered, so many moments never to be shared. With the fire closing in, he felt his strength waning. It seemed that this would be the end. Miserable, afraid, and in excruciating pain, he still reached for his ringing phone. If only this catastrophe hadn't struck on such a pivotal day, he thought, he might have been living a storybook life. A fairy tale ending with the woman of his dreams seemed so close, yet so far. His scorched body was tossed near the waters, and as he felt the cool touch of the water offering a fleeting sense of relief, he knew he would never see her again. In his final moments, a glimmer of light flickered from his hand, a last vestige of hope amidst the darkness. History had long forgotten when the inexplicable began. Aliens had silently invaded Earth, and strange occurrences became more frequent. Initially dismissed as rumors or hoaxes, these events escalated into undeniable phenomena. Records of these strange occurrences stretched back as far as 1934, when the corpse of a giant dragon fell from the sky, overturning a fishing boat before mysteriously vanishing a day later. In 1947, a colossal crab-like creature appeared on the west coast of the United States, killing 15 people in front of hundreds of witnesses. More recently, in 2020, a monstrous aquatic being was discovered in the southeastern region of the Dragon Kingdom. The cataclysmic events had a strange commonality. They all seemed to vanish overnight, as if they had never occurred. Despite the destruction they wrought, these incidents were often dismissed as man-made disasters, and the true nature of their origins remained shrouded in mystery. People began to take notice, speculating about the fate of the ancient city of Lintian and seeking solace in religion and prayers, fearing they might be next. RMC slowly regained consciousness in a strange, ethereal blue world. A muffled, gargling noise resonated from above as he struggled to get his bearings. When he finally managed to take in his surroundings, he was met with an odd sight. The undersides of lily pads and bubbles rising to the surface. Glancing down, he was stunned to see fins where his hands once were. Realization dawned slowly, and disbelief turned into frustration as he comprehended his transformation. He had turned into a fish. What in Poseidon's name is happening here? He thought, bewildered. His gaze fell upon a fragment of a broken mirror lodged in the depths. As he examined his new form, a plump, red-scaled carp with a peculiar red diamond gem on his forehead, he couldn't help but be shocked by the bizarre turn of events. Around him, other fish swam casually, oblivious to his distress. The surreal nature of his situation led him to ponder his own survival. Shouldn't he be dead by now? The last thing he remembered was the giant monster wreaking havoc on the city. Perhaps his transformation into a carp was somehow connected to the abyssal chaos. Another question floating in his mind was what happened to his girl, Xiaoshui? What happened to that monster that scorched his flesh and bones? He's so full of questions, and the only way to get to an answer is to go out there and have a look. The problem was that his current body and the situation overall were too restrictive. It would be great if he could leave this place first. Bad vibes were oozing all over the area. Feeling the predatory stare coming from behind him, it seemed like his senses were spot on. An army of crab-like beasts with their sharp pincers and steel-like carapace just happens to be fixated on the lone little carp. He tried to swim away to the best of his abilities, but his little fins could only do so much. The crabs were coming for him like he was the tastiest snack in the water. This death chase went on until he hit a literal dead end, as another beast prevented him from swimming any further. A massive body swam above the predators and the prey. It cast a shadow so massive that it seemingly covered what little light that could penetrate through the depths. It was a blue-scaled fish with sharp and strong teeth. It latched onto one of the tough, shelled crabs, and the rest scurried away like insects. Just like before, another massive shadow cast darkness on the depths. This time, however, it was even bigger and bulkier than the blue-scaled fish. It was a purple beast that dwarfed a blue scale, swiftly taking a bite out of the medium-sized predator. Its multiple eyes shone brightly like an anomaly straight out of the void. The little carp luckily found a dilapidated steel mailbox situated on the floor. Its size was just enough to serve as a hideout. Seeing how harsh the environment in this place was, he realized that the thought of leaving this place would be harder than he could have imagined. Forget about leaving the depths. Just staying alive among these incredulous beasts was already an insurmountable problem on its own. The fear of being eaten by a bigger and badder creature triggered a notification sound in his head. The invincible upgrade system is successfully activated. In front of his eyes, the water started bubbling with a magical light as it slowly formed some semblance of shape. When the magical light started to fade, it was replaced by a bountiful flesh scantily covered by a golden brazier. Her hair was bluer than the ocean, her limbs more luscious than the most precious pearls. An upper body of a human, more like a goddess, really. Her lower body took the form of a tail with the scales of a marine creature. The most beautiful mermaid I've ever seen for real. Little Carp just had a blank look on his face, asking her what she was supposed to be. The mermaid goddess didn't respond with words. She just took him by his little red fin and started bolting away at the speed of sound. The ride alone almost killed the poor guy from the sheer pressure and speed. They zoomed through bountiful marine life with only one destination in mind. The kind-hearted mermaid goddess brought the little carp to a more fitting venue away from the fearsome, oversized beasts. The shallow waters. Now that they're here, he asked about her identity once again. Scratch that. Maybe the more fitting question was, what in the world is she? She simply introduced herself as the little carp system, but I'll continue calling her Mermaid Goddess because that's what she deserves. Miss Mermaid Goddess kindly opened up our MC status window. His name was Lin Hao, a level 1 black koi. 3 centimeters in length and 0. 4 grams heavy. Combat power at 0. 1. No skills, no supernatural power. No evolution points. No drip, nor riz, no hose. If that's the case, then how can he upgrade? How can he go from a useless fish to one that can at least survive? The mermaid goddess solution to that problem was quite simple. Lin Hao just has to eat. So, he followed her instructions and ate the first piece of loose crumbs he saw floating in the water. Devouring that breadcrumb gave him a whopping 0. 1 evolution points, proving that he can evolve just by consuming things. He stared blankly at the personification of his system. Then Lin Hao proceeded to go on a feeding frenzy as breadcrumbs started raining from above. Looking down from above, this body of water appears peaceful and tranquil, especially beneath the soft light of the night sky. Below, Lin Hao had just finished gorging himself with whatever he could get his mouth on. He even had a cute little bump on his stomach from working so hard. The last session was particularly grueling, but it only granted him 5 evolution points. Miss Mermaid Goddess just casually laid down on the pond floor, watching his every move. Lin Hao was starting to feel that he was getting scammed here. Is it really appropriate to add these little evolution points after he put in so much effort to eat? After that brief break from filling himself up, other mindless fishes joined in on the free breadcrumbs raining from above. Although he was pretty full now, Lin Hao couldn't let all those unremarkable extras get all the nutrients from these precious crumbs. He swam, turned, twisted his body, and chomped, not letting a single piece of bread get past him. He only got half an evolution point for doing all those tricks, but that was plenty enough. Now that he thought of it, who in the world was feeding fish in the middle of the night? The answer to that question might be a lot closer to his heart than he could ever imagine. It was a woman, longingly looking at a locket containing a photo of herself and a young man who looked exactly like Lin Hao back when he still had limbs and didn't have scales. That's right, it was his baby. As her tears clouded the lens of her glasses, she recalled the last promise that he gave her. Lin Hao swore that he would wait for her to come back no matter what. Lin Hao the carp stayed near the water's surface out of curiosity and heard his name being uttered by the woman. At first, he just thought that the grieving woman's husband had the same name as him or something. Xiaoxu was so distraught and distracted that the sentimental locket in her hand accidentally slipped. Seeing the last piece of her lover's memory literally slip through her fingers made her panic immensely. She tried to catch it, but gravity had already done its thing. The locket was heading over the railing and into the water. All the fish, including Lin Hao, got out of the way in fear of getting bonked by the incoming metal. This unfortunate incident just made Xiaoxue cry and suffer even harder than she already was. But there was not enough time to be down in the dumps. A man came up to her respectfully referring to Xiaoxue as team leader Luo. It sounded like they had somewhere else to be urgent. She wiped her tears as if they weren't there in the first place. Team leader Luo put her glasses back on and her voice turned stern. Turning away from the railing to the shallow waters, Xiaoxue needed to continue her life. She reassured Lin Hao not to worry, for she would come and find him when everything was over, even if the search took her to the ends of the world. In the water, the locket accidentally opened mid-fall, and the little carp saw the photo inside the thing. It was him and the love of his life, Xiaoxue. Connecting the dots, the one who dropped this locket and the one feeding the fish of the shallows bread was his girl. Lin Hao desperately swam up with every strength that his tiny body could muster. He prayed that Xiaoxue didn't do anything stupid. He was almost there. He could already see the light of the night sky peering through the surface and the departing figure of the woman of his dreams. When he finally broke through the water to profess that he was still alive, that he was Lin Hao, Xiaoxue was already gone. So close, yet so far. The little fish had never felt more dejected than now. Crying his eyes out with snot cascading from his nose, the little carp was starting to realize just how troublesome it was not to be able to speak. He just couldn't live without his baby. How could he survive without Xiaoxue? Wait, she might be gone, but the locket pocket watch was still descending to the depths of the shallow water. Lin Hao changed course and headed down to the uncharted waters of the shallows. The creatures at this level were considered extremely deadly for a fish of his size. Each one of them could probably gulp him down like he was doing with all those breadcrumbs. But that pocket watch was a token of love between him and his girl. He must get it back no matter what. But realistically speaking, he was just way too weak to do it right now. It was frustrating, but it was the truth. He could only ask fate just why it kept playing tricks on them. Why did they always miss each other by a hair's breadth? Wiping his fish tears away, he sealed his resolve not to succumb to the insurmountable challenge. He would do everything in his power to get out of the water, hoping that by then, Xiaoxue would still be waiting for him to come back. Lin Hao dove back into the shallows. The surface water returned to its quiet and empty tranquility. Not far from that peaceful surface, life of all sizes was roaming around, governed by their instincts. But there was one particular anomaly that was operating beyond his physical needs. A fish with the willpower of a desperate man, eating everything that moved and could provide nutrition. Lin Hao graduated from free breadcrumbs to eating smaller fishes and crustaceans to level up at an astonishing rate. The mermaid goddess quietly watched him gorge himself with seafood. In her experience as the personification of the system, those blessed usually stayed alone for the first few days. This was the first time that she had seen a fish so diligent to get stronger from the very beginning. Lin Hao was so blazing fast that another notification had already dinged in his head. A prompt stated that the host had met the evolution conditions. He could evolve right here and right now. He still didn't know what this evolution thing did, but the prompt demanded a simple yes or no answer. He had to choose. Of course, the natural course of action was to choose yes and cash in on his hard work. A magical light shone beneath his tail as a qualitative change started taking place inside his tiny body. As for the answer to his question regarding what evolution could do, Miss Mermaid Goddess just answered that everything was possible. It took a while. It must have taken the whole night for the evolution to conclude. Lin Hao must have lost consciousness in the middle of all the changes happening in his fish body. When he opened his eyes, he felt a whole lot different from before. Ms. Mermaid Goddess had been watching over him the entire time, making sure that the evolution process went smoothly. He was just a little freaked out to see her inquisitive gaze first thing after waking up. Ms. Mermaid Goddess was quite puzzled that Lin Hao took so long to upgrade when this was just supposed to be the first evolution. Lin Hao was not quite sure either, but he was certain that his body felt a little longer and his scales a lot thicker than they were. He was not that pudgy little carp anymore. He had gained a little more splendor. Ms. Mermaid Goddess asked him what body part of his got longer. If she asked me that, I would have folded. But Lin Hao is a fish, so his body was pretty much the only thing that could develop. Looking at his status window, he had already reached level 3. His body was 45 centimeters long, weighing 4 kilos. Combat power was at 1, 2, and he gained the power tail rack and steel scale armor skills. Still no supernatural powers, and his evolution threshold had expanded to 200 points. The standout among that wall of text was the appearance of 2 new skills. Lin Hao was not expecting that addition at all. The mermaid goddess explained that for 3 seconds, the scales on his whole body would become as hard as steel. But it was a 10-second cooldown. A shield after every 10 seconds sounded quite powerful. While they were discussing the skills, a commotion started not far from their position. It was the typical rule of nature, survival of the fittest, and those that fell got predated upon. This time, a massive fish had fallen against a coalition of different marine life. They feasted on the creature's lifeless body without mercy. It might be a grisly scene, but Lin Hao saw it as an opportunity to test some things out. The first fish that sensed his incoming presence already knew that the new and improved Lin Hao was bad news. The evolved carp immediately proved that conjecture by tail slapping 2 bigger creatures into oblivion. He went from being free food into a carp that could hold its own against other predators. Lin Hao wasn't done yet. While everyone else was distracted with eating what little meat they could get from the dying massive fish, the carp was dealing free hits from left and right. It seemed like one-shotting these bastards got him feeling a little overconfident. A gargantuan beast with its sharp fangs came out of nowhere aiming to make him a scrumptious lunch. But Lin Hao was not going to fall that easily. He turned around without a hint of fear. His eyes exuded a calm and collected confidence. This was the perfect opportunity to test his other skill. The one that gives him an overpowered shield every 10 seconds. His body shone brightly, indicative of a borderline invincible scales. The sneaky predator that dared to take him by surprise was going to need a fish dentist to fix those messed up teeth. It had only been a day, and Lin Hao had already made a ton of progress with regard to strength. He was quite pleased with himself. Seeing him dominate the shallow waters, the mermaid goddess started doling out quests. His ordinary task was to swallow 100 black shell shrimps, and the reward would be an improved night vision ability. The difficult task, on the other hand, demanded that he devour a mutated creature, and the reward would be a random skill. With the existence of possible quests, he couldn't help but wonder just what the finish line for this devouring evolution was. She added that the rewards given after succeeding in these missions could be far more impressive. Thinking of just how impressive these rewards could be, he asked her if there was a reward that could make him human again. Miss Mermaid Goddess reiterated what she had been saying since the start. With the system in place, everything was virtually possible. Understanding those words gave Lin Hao a newfound hope. Since it was technically possible for him to become human again, the priority should be to get that token of his and Xiao Sui's love, the pocket watch on the pond floor. But going back to the depths and the horrors that lurked within would be a Herculean task. A multitude of creatures that could kill him easily were hidden all over the place. The mermaid goddess gravely warned him that rushing into the deep water in his current state would be tantamount to suicide. He would surely die. Lin Hao didn't listen. He just wanted to be left alone for a little bit. After a while, he managed to sneak past the immediate threats, reaching the deep floor and hiding behind some kelps. It was now or never. A great opportunity just presented itself as all the big fish had momentarily dispersed away from the pocket watch. He steadily made his way to the trinket, trying his best not to get noticed by the passing predators. As he got closer and closer to the pocket watch, the only thing on his mind was his beloved Xiaoxue. He was so tunnel-visioned to take what's rightfully his that he failed to notice a glaring problem with his sly plan. The big fish had dispersed away from the area because they were afraid of the slumbering, enormous hunter in the area. Lin Hao stopped in his tracks, seeing the scale of the monster in front of him. He could not help but feel the exact same feeling as when he was in Lintian ancient city. The mermaid goddess had to bail him out of that grave situation, scolding Lin Hao for rushing into danger without a proper plan of action or any thoughts. He looked like a child getting reprimanded. He felt so powerless that he couldn't even retrieve something so important to him. For some reason, his thoughts wandered towards his previous life with Xiaoxue. Back in those days, he was consumed with work all the time, but he was happy living with the love of his life. She had always loved his look when he was consumed with concentration. Sometimes Xiaoxue would interrupt him lovingly, telling him that she was hungry or something. He's the type of guy who would drop everything he's doing to ask his girl what she wants to eat. That day was Noodles Day. He made her a scrumptious hot meal ready to be devoured, and he even added an egg on top. He cheerfully brought the hearty meal to their room, urging Xiaoxue to dig in. When she didn't respond the first time, a bad feeling started creeping in. Xiaoxue was gone, nowhere in sight. Lin Hao was left hanging with a bowl of noodle soup made with love in hand. Mermaid Goddess had to wake him up from his stupor. He didn't know why his thoughts drifted towards that day. Lin Hao just shook his head and assured the system that it was nothing. She conjured up a water projection of the pocket watch and stated that if he wanted something, he'd have to fight hard for it. All he can do now is work hard to devour and evolve. He touched the water-conjured pocket watch, and it dissolved into nothing. It will take a while before he can retrieve the real one. Deep inside, he already knew that what she'd been telling him was right. The direction that the mermaid goddess gave him added a much-needed boost to morale. He's just hyped to grind and evolve. He started experimenting with the various sea creatures in the shallows. The first one on the list was the massive conches mucking about on the pond floor. He could swear that these things weren't supposed to be so big. For the sake of finding out what works and what doesn't, he shoved the whole conch into his mouth. He tried to bite into it, but the shell was just too tough to break. It just wasn't worth it to go through all that trouble right now. Lin Hao immediately spat the conch out in disgust. It was basically inedible. Even though there were a ton of them on the pond floor, he couldn't really devour them for evolution points. It was just another source of frustration. This just discouraged him from his mission even more. If he can't bite through a conch, then he can only snack on fish for now. It might take him forever to evolve at this point. Let's take a break from what's happening underwater and look at the shores. A heavy-duty and fully equipped vehicle just pulled up next to the beachfront, and by the looks of their equipment, it seemed like they meant some serious business. It was Xiaoxue, also known as Team Leader Luo, and her subordinates. Their destination was supernatural in nature. It was a draconic corpse that washed up on the beach. Authorities have cordoned off the area, but no one has a clue what to do just yet. Even the team leader's subordinate hasn't seen something like this. The creature looked like it came from the depths, but there were no records of an animal of this size and appearance. It's a curious mystery for some, but not for Xiaoxue. She immediately bolted out of the car after seeing the beast. She ordered all personnel to start the evacuation procedures and maintain a hefty distance from the creature. The team leader warned them that this thing could explode at any moment now. Have you ever heard of cases of whale explosions? There have been instances of whales exploding due to the excessive accumulation of putrid gases during the decomposition stage of whale corpses. With a big enough size, it is without a doubt one of the deadliest natural bioweapons in the world. The same principle could be applied to this washed-up giant on the beach. Xiaoxue hurriedly donned some minimal protective gear, and instructed her men to prepare the ventilation pipes. She used a standard scalpel to cut through the corpse's thick and slimy flesh. Using the incision, the ventilation pipe was promptly inserted. Now that the pipes are connected, it should lessen the probability of the worst-case scenario happening. The one in charge of monitoring the corpse's status hurriedly informed her that something was off. Despite lessening the stress with the ventilation pipes, the scanners were giving them error readings. Team leader Luo realized that this could only mean one thing and mandated that everyone gets away from the site. Her men weren't too quick on the uptake, so she had to simplify the orders. Everyone must run for their lives. She had to drag away the wimpy scanner guy from the impending explosion as the beast carcass started to exhibit imminent signs of explosion. Just like she expected, it was a gory mess of an eruption. Putrid blood, vile, and liquefied organs blasted all over the beach. Seeing that disgusting sight must have been too much for some, so let's head back to the tranquil shallow waters. Terrifying shrimps have made the shallow floors their turf with their numbers. But that's about to change because a new predator has just arrived in town. Lin Hao has been devouring black-shell shrimps for 1 evolution point a pop. Their meat isn't bad. The shells are nice and crunchy, and they net more evolution points than fish scraps. He has hunted so many of these things that he unlocked the Black Shell Shrimp Hunter achievement, granting him a normal treasure chest. Even Miss Mermaid Goddess was shocked that Lin Hao had already devoured over 200 of those water cockroaches. The achievement system gifted him with the choice to open the normal chest immediately, and he took it. A magical chest started manifesting in the hands of the Mermaid Goddess. When it opened, its mystical contents started enveloping Lin Hao's body. Strength up, bubble blast, resilient fins, agility up, critical up, defense up, stamina up, and many more options started appearing before his eyes. Among the many choices, the one that stood out to Lin Hao the most was the razor-sharp teeth upgrade. That would be a pretty neat spec to invest in. Right? Well, it's a reward after all. There's no reason for it to be bad or anything. Miss Mermaid just watched from the sidelines, and when the confirmation was finalized, she excitedly urged him to show what upgrade he chose. Her eyes were practically shining in anticipation. Wasn't she supposed to be the personification of the system? She should be fully aware of what he chose, right? However, she explained that perk rewards are pulled out randomly. Not even the system can direct or manipulate those choices. Lin Hao eagerly awaited as the selected reward started taking effect. The first thing that he noticed was that this perk gave him an intense feeling of itchiness. He swam in circles, trying to alleviate the itch, but it was of no help. It was so uncomfortable that he needed something to grind his teeth against. The first thing he saw was the conchus strolling on the floor slowly. The thing that he couldn't break just hours before was crushed in a single bite without any resistance. He hurriedly swam back to Miss Mermaid to show her the upgrade. He flashed his teeth and asked her opinion on its appearance. Seeing the grotesque and overgrown fangs, she just skirted around the obvious answer by stating that this was outside of his field of expertise. So, no comment. It might look a little odd, but the razor-sharp teeth perk was an extremely useful one when it comes to hunting. Lin Hao could easily hunt schools of fish now. It's just his bad luck that the most bountiful group of fish here, the dark ones, tasted awful. Concerning his other quest, he could only imagine how a mutated creature would taste like. This brings up the question of what even counts as a mutated creature. Maybe those are organisms that underwent mutation because of polluted water. He asked the Mermaid Goddess if these quests are generated on conditions that are possible to fulfill in the current environment, or if they're also randomly generated. The system herself doesn't know the answer to that. If the former was true, then it means that there's a mutated creature in this pond. The same kind as the one that killed him as a human. While Lin Hao was deep in thought, he felt a covert presence sneakily moving around him. He quickly turned around to see what was up, but there was nothing there. He could not see what was lurking in the dark, but he just felt a chill running up his spine. And then he heard some human voices from above. They were plotting to release some pleco fish into the wild, knowing full well that it's illegal and harmful. From their boat came dozens of pleco fish finding their new home on these peaceful waters. Lin Hao was angered to see some demons releasing an invasive species right into the wild, right into his home. Just as the fleckofish were about to acclimate to their surroundings, a presence from below started stretching to the surface. A massive creature just saw the travesty up above and decided to make a move. It was a serpentine creature whose length could stretch from the depths to the surface, and it looked pissed. Warning signs started blaring through Lin Hao's system. It was a threat alert sensing the appearance of a highly dangerous creature. The system urged Lin Hao to prepare for combat. The serpentine monster slithered up the water to feast on the invasive fleckafishes as Lin Hao watched from below. He racked his brain for his next action. He knew that it was going to be very difficult for him to get out of this mess on account of the tiny pond's size. To make matters worse, a messed-up-looking shark-type beast had joined the fray to munch on some of that freshly dropped blackfish lunch. The two mutated monsters inevitably met in the middle of their respective feasts, and they immediately expressed hostility toward one another. Mr. Snake got the jump on the rough shark, biting through its tough scales and letting the poor beast bleed underwater. This snake simply had the advantage when it came to speed and size. It could coil its flexible frame around to find the best angle of attack. Lin Hao, the koi, was just watching the fight with a smile. When the bird and oyster struggle, the fisherman reaps the gains. It seemed like he could be the fisherman today. He kept his eyes on the brawl, but he noticed that some of the pleco fishes had sprawled around his vicinity. Lin Hao quickly chomped on the invasive species with his razor-sharp teeth. He swiftly realized that this fish was a lot harder to swallow than it looked. Another added hassle was that its flesh was getting stuck in his teeth. The only saving grace that made these little bastards worth eating was that they could give 10 evolution points. It's a good deal. Lin Hao could get some good EXP out of this. Up near the water's surface, it looked like the battle of the beasts had concluded in a very bloody manner. The rough shark had been brutally beheaded by the snake beast. Moreover, it looked like the serpentine monster wasn't satisfied with just a single mutated meal. Sensing some movement in the water, it turned its eyes below, where Lin Hao was busy chomping on defenseless small fries. It quickly made a U-turn to face the little koi, evidently hungry for more fresh meat. Lin Hao tried to calm himself down, so as not to fumble in a panic. He desperately searched for a way out of the tricky situation. Fortunately, he quickly spotted a weakness that gave him a glimmer of hope. The snake beast had been wounded in its fight against the rough shark. Along its slender body was a deep and long gash that was bleeding profusely. But this wound just made the snake a lot more vicious and aggressive, hungry to snack on the koi's meat. Lin Hao maneuvered around, utilizing his small size to quickly sneak into the monster's blind spot. After making sure that he was out of the enemy's vision, Lin Hao crammed his body inside a small cavern of rocks. Mr. Snake turned its head to where Lin Hao had run, confused as to where that little prey had gone. When you're the size of this monster, you can just brute force your way into finding your next meal. It used its whip-like body to quickly destroy the rock formations on the pond bed. Once that wild rampage was done, the topography looked like an unrecognizable wreckage of rocks and debris. Lin Hao managed to survive through the thrashing unscathed. He reckoned that with those plecos still around, the snake would probably lose interest in a small koi like him as long as he stayed hidden. But he could not shake the chill he was feeling going down his spine. That's because the beast did not give up after a single whipping session. It kept on striking the rocks, pulverizing everything under them. This time, Lin Hao was afflicted by the collapse of the formation in which he was hiding. He didn't know why, but this snake was unusually keen on killing him. If he didn't get smashed to death, he needed to rush out of this place as soon as he could. He might still have a chance of survival if he succeeded in doing so. And so, he steeled his resolve and timed his escape with the strike of the monster's tail. Unfortunately for our boy, the monster wasn't blind. It immediately opened its mouth in his direction. The red menacing tongue of the monster started stretching and binding Lin Hao's body. Being caught while trying to escape nearly zapped his hope of survival. Lin Hao tried using his mighty tail swipe to no avail. There might not be any way to make up for this sheer gap in power. As the fangs followed the tongue, the snake was about to have its little snack. Lin Hao couldn't die just yet. The love of his life was still waiting for him. Speaking of the love of Lin Hao's life, Xiao Shui was preoccupied with dealing with the case of the exploding whale. As the team leader, she led her subordinates out of the way to avoid getting doused and impacted by monster matter. Some debris was about to hit her while retreating, but a certain someone managed to get a hold of team leader Luo. His manly frame easily spun Xiaoshu's body out of harm's way, putting his back in the way to tank the incoming hail of flesh and blood. He had a stoic expression on his gruff face while protecting Xiaoshu. Once the explosion died down, she took a peek at the aftermath. Putrid blood, organs, and the insides of a decomposing monster littered the sandy beach on a rainy day. Now that the high-stakes part was done, Xiaoshu went back to professional mode and politely thanked one of her subordinates. Upon further inspection of the aftermath, she noticed something extremely eye-catching and alarming sprawled on the sand. Among the decomposing matter was a shiny green sludge that stood out among the crimson meat. She immediately determined that the worst-case scenario had happened. Xiaoshu turned to her subordinate and demanded that he and everyone else should get every weapon they could get their hands on. These green blobs were the monster's eggs. They couldn't let even a single one of these things crawl back into the water. Thankfully, the military unit of their team was nearby and the response was fast and reliable. Armed forces equipped with complete, specialized armor and weapons skillfully stormed the beach with impressive speed. Even team leader Luo took up arms, and she looked like she really knew how to work an automatic firearm. On her go signal, she and the rest of her team rained down bullets on the green blobs integrated with the monster's rotten flesh. Her subordinate could not help but praise her for her smarts and deadliness with a weapon. While eliminating the eggs of the beast, Xiaoshu was calm and collected to a terrifying degree. She was absolutely cold-blooded. As if sensing that the love of his life was also struggling at the moment, Lin Hao refused to die in his own dire situation. He couldn't die in the deep waters of a pond full of regrets. The diamond gem attached to his forehead started giving off a mysterious light. He gritted his teeth, and the only thing on his mind was the will to survive. It turned out that the snake beast had swallowed him whole. He was now at the mercy of the monster's digestive system. Seeing the insides of the beast, he was reminded of one simple fact that may spell his death or survival. This snake was wounded in its fight with the shark earlier. As far as Lin Hao remembered, there was a deep gash somewhere on the monster's back. Right now, he was situated in the middle of the thing's stomach. He just needed to find his way toward the monster's back. If he fails to find the only way out on time, he will undoubtedly suffer the same fate as all the partially digested remains scattered around the snake's digestive tract. Lin Hao dismissed all thoughts of defeat, for he had steel scale armor to protect him when push came to shove. With the use of his razor-sharp teeth, that wound would inevitably be found and desecrated. While venturing deeper and deeper into the monster's insides, he saw a green light full of vitality in the distance. That might be a sign that the beast was healing rapidly. And it was. Outside, the snake beast was munching on some bizarre aquatic herbs to boost his regenerative abilities. When Lin Hao got near the healing light, the flesh was already partially recovered. But this much should not be an issue, for he could just use his ability to harden his scales to an indestructible degree, and then just forcefully ram his entire body right into the recovering wound to forcefully tear it open from the inside. Imagine being the snake beast at this moment. You just had a tiny fish snack, and then you feel something piercing out of your belly with a grating roughness. Lin Hao had enough momentum to create an even bigger wound than the one he used as an exit door. Blood started spurting out of the wound. The snake took all that unimaginable pain and directed it toward the little koi that just messed up his insides. Lin Hao had somehow made his way up near the surface, creating some decent distance between him and the beast. He thanked his lucky stars that the monster was already injured. He would have been done otherwise. Out in the wild once again, Miss Mermaid Goddess finally made her appearance. Looking from above, Lin Hao could not help but ask how deep this alleged pond was. It could fit giant monsters like the mutant water serpent, so there might be some sort of interdimensional portal at the bottom. But that's for Lin Hao to find out for himself. Now that he was out of harm's way, Lin Hao saw that the big pleco fishes had been wiped out, leaving only the little ones. Isn't it natural that he should get a turn to feast on the smaller plecos? As soon as the blackfishes noticed the koi coming up to their spot, it seemed like they already knew what was to come. Lin Hao swam up with newfound enthusiasm as he aimed to gladly enjoy nature's gifts. His cheerful mood on the way up was quickly doused while snacking on his prey. All the EXP that he was getting was sweet, but the taste of the fish itself was awful. But he persevered through the inedible tastes and managed to accumulate enough EXP to fulfill the conditions of his next evolution. Of course, he quickly started the process of his next level up. His body glowed with a blinding supernatural light as his entire genetic makeup was altered. Lin Hao the Black Koi reached level 4, growing in size and increasing his combat power to 3. 2. In his new status window, everything was pretty much upgraded in terms of quality, but there were also some new lines added. Miss Mermaid appeared to guide him through the new weapons in his arsenal. A new thing he picked up was the passive skill called Tearing Bite. It does what it says and increases his biting strength. It sounded pretty good, but Lin Hao was underwhelmed with this evolution. While he was glad to reach 70 centimeters, he was still nothing compared to the size of that snake that ate him. Along with his upgraded battle prowess were new quests. His normal quests were to devour 100 pleco fishes and 100 apple snails to increase teeth sharpness and scale toughness, respectively. And the special quest was to devour one mutated creature for a random skill. Lin Hao immediately locked in and aimed to feast on more disgusting plecos. At this point, the plecos had wised up and started swimming away from this gluttonous koi. It made hunting them down a little more difficult, but with his speed and tearing bite, it was no problem for Lin Hao. Then something weird happened. One of the fishes that he targeted had an unusually frail body. It was merely an empty shell without any organs or fish bones inside. There were disgustingly colorful loaches inside the shell instead. Upon closer look, the faces on these loaches were the stuff of nightmares. Something that would make anyone's skin crawl. Lin Hao hadn't even made sense of the weirdness that he was witnessing when the loach darted out of the empty shell as if its life depended on it. It managed to spot another fish with no thoughts behind its fish eyes. The colorful loach opened its vile maw and tiny whiskers of tentacles, while it viciously lunged for the eyes of the fish. The poor guy started writhing in pain while the disgusting parasite burrowed its way into the fish's brain. Lin Hao could not believe his eyes. He could have been that poor fish if the loach had decided to target his eyes instead. He was mortified. What in the world was happening in this pond? Lin Hao watched in horror as the parasite ate the brains of the unwitting fish, just swimming mindlessly. He turned to the mermaid goddess to ask if he could eat those parasitic things, and she nonchalantly answered that he could try. Always want to try new things without a fuss. Lin Hao chomped down on the newly possessed fish, and the loach immediately wriggled out to safety. It was surprisingly fast enough to get out of dodge before getting ground down by his razor-sharp teeth. Lin Hao felt infuriated that something so small could run away right out of his hungry mouth. These parasitic loaches were obviously not from this pond, but they surprisingly knew their way around the deep end. With their impressive speed and nearly invisible size, they managed to maneuver around the countless deadly aquatic beasts lurking in the depths. The shallow waters might seem calm at first glance, but every second a living creature spins in this place is chock full of anxiety. Even Lin Hao experienced that. Aside from that anxiety, the mermaid goddess could sense that the little koi was still thinking about that pocket watch that dropped down below. Lin Hao realized that he needed to hurry up and upgrade his kit even more to retrieve that pocket watch. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. And so, the koi darted into the school of plecos to accumulate even more points. Meanwhile, on a shoreline far away from the pond, a fishing boat had been cordoned off and surrounded by police for some mysterious reasons. Inside, one of the fishermen suffered a neck wound so severe that it couldn't be shown on YouTube with how brutal it was. Forensic experts had been deployed to make sense of the incident that struck this innocuous fishing boat. The other fisherman who was there at the scene of the crime looked like he had seen a ghost or something. He kept on insisting that the crew was killed by a loach, but the authorities just looked at him like a crazy person. A simple loach could not possibly inflict such vicious wounds on a human, right? Being treated like he was insane, the fisherman started freaking out and asserting that he wasn't lying, and a loach bit right through his buddy's neck and buried itself into the corpse's body. He was under duress and extremely scared the night that it happened, but calling the police didn't even come to his mind. Furthermore, this guy just implied that the entire crew was killed, but there was only one body inside the boat. If that's the case, where were the other victims? The fisherman heard that, and a chill ran down his spine. He started behaving more erratically and insisted that he saw everyone being killed by that loach. He also warned them right from the start that the loach had bad vibes, but the crew still brought it back. Now that all was said and done, he felt despair. He kept on repeating that it's over. Everything is over now. Luckily, one of the police officers realized that this was above their pay grade and ordered a call to the Dragon unit. Those guys might provide some answers they desperately needed. This Dragon unit in question was led by the intricate hands of someone we know. She was currently inspecting fish found in the fishing boat. Xiaoxi was already expecting to see what she was currently seeing. In this boat, there was nothing but empty shells of aquatic life. She grimly asked the surviving fishermen where they caught this cursed batch, and he answered that they ventured near the blocked coastline. Xiaoxi remained calm and asked about the missing bodies of the rest of the crew. The police found the last traces of their blood near a local lake nearby. Team leader Luo started connecting the dots. It seemed that the mutant creature explosion the other day was also invaded by this mutant loach. Its body was full of loach eggs, but that monster was just another victim out of who knows how many others. She immediately hopped on a phone call to inform her team that they had a big problem. The mutant eggs had already entered the inland waters. They needed to organize a rescue in the sub-district. For now, she wanted to be taken to that river where the last traces of the human victims were detected. Back in the shallow waters of the pond, Lin Hao let out an exhausted burp as he continuously shoved fish right down his gullet. Miss Mermaid was lazily watching him from the side, curious as to why he insisted on eating only pleco fish when he had such a wide array of choices in this pond. Lin Hao just wanted to eradicate these invasive species. Besides, he had eaten almost everything that could pose a threat in the shallow water. The rest of the ecology were harmless, native inhabitants that could be left alone peacefully. Moreover, his deliberate mission to eradicate plecafishes gave him enough evolution points to upgrade himself once again. He knew that every time he evolved, there was a possibility of getting a new skill. The last one he got was a skill called auspiciousness. It might have something to do with qi. While he was tinkering with his status window, a notification for his quest refresh popped up. His normal mission was still hunting pleco fish, but his special mission increased the goal to devour mutated creatures from 1 to 10 with a blue treasure chest as a reward. Since it was early in the morning, his hypothesis that missions refreshed every new day was pretty much confirmed. He looked at the conditions to devour 10 mutant creatures and felt that it sounded a little absurd. Eating them when there weren't that many mutant creatures in this pond in the first place sounded ridiculous. Also, he was positive that those parasitic loaches he spotted were supposed to live in the sea. It was entirely possible that someone or something unleashed those mutated parasites in this dragon pond. Maybe they were mixed in with those plecos. Lin Hao shook his head, getting rid of useless, winding thoughts. It was time to focus on reaping the gains of his hard work. It was time to evolve once again. Upon confirming the evolution process, the supernatural light originating from his diamond gem started swallowing his whole body again. Lin Hao the Black Koi reached level 7. His body was now 3 meters long and weighing 6 pounds. Combat power skyrocketed to 7 points. His passive auspiciousness could now increase the evolution speed of nearby plants and animals by a small amount. He also gained the ability to camouflage upon staying still in an area. It essentially made him a water chameleon. The moment that the evolution was completed, Lin Hao ordinary fishes of different shapes, sizes, and colors started swimming around him, gracefully. This must be due to his divine power being upgraded. The auspiciousness passive skill attracted nearby plants and animals nearby by buffing their evolution speed. On the surface of the pond, a little girl and her mother were watching all kinds of colorful marine life dance around one particular koi. The little girl was delighted to see so many fish put on a spectacular show, but her mother warned her that they needed to get going as this pond was about to go into lockdown. Just as the mother said, the sound of troops marching in unison started advancing steadily. The armed forces formed a barricade around the pond while firmly demanding all civilians leave the area quickly. They promptly deployed some underwater gadgets into the pond to get the lay of the land, or in this case, water. Lin Hao saw these bizarre, high-tech-looking gadgets and got close to one out of curiosity. Based on the pulsing signal coming out of the sphere's surface, these gadgets should be detective devices. It turned out that getting close to one of these devices was the worst thing that he could have done as the light it was emitting turned red and a silent alarm started blaring. Up on the surface, The computer receiving the transmission indicated that the gadgets deployed had detected a mutant creature. Consequently, Lin Hao's own system started acting up and bombarding him with warning messages. It was simply alarming to him of the fact that he had been detected. Now that the presence of mutated creatures deep in the pond has been confirmed, specialized forces equipped with diving gear have been deployed to check things out on site. In their hands were sharp harpoons to use in case of an attack. On one corner of the pond, Lin Hao's system was practically begging him to get the hell out after being marked as a mutant creature. Every angle he looked at was filled with blaring bright warnings. As he looked above, the silhouette of the divers came into view. Lin Hao already knew that the deep waters were teeming with too many unknown factors, making it dangerous. He didn't expect that the danger could come from dry land, too. Dangerous or not, he couldn't just keep holding still like a sitting duck in the shallows, waiting for the sweet release of death. He'd rather take a chance in the deeper levels instead of dealing with the unknown power level of human forces. The koi made his way deep into the cavernous danger zones of the mysterious dragon pond. He was surprised to find out that the depths were not so bad with his current capabilities. Times had changed, and he was no longer at the bottom of the food chain. Miss Mermaid Goddess reappeared once again. This time, she was urging him to venture even further into the depths, to the crevices they had yet to see, an idea that Lin Hao heavily opposed. As the personification of his system, couldn't the mermaid goddess just wish for his well-being for once instead of egging him and pushing him, the host, into the fire pit time and time again? The mermaid goddess relented and settled for advising Lin how to just grab a bite before they hid deeper into the depths. Once he looked at the possible prey that the mermaid was pointing at, Lin Hao felt goosebumps all over his body, even though it was physically impossible for a fish. Who wouldn't feel creeped out upon seeing a fish with multiple parasitic loaches clinging to its head? Lin Hao decided to use one of his newly acquired skills. Camouflage. This ability was quite handy. It was the perfect tool for sneak attacks. Since he was up for the challenge, the poor prey he was testing it on was the loach-infested fish. Lin Hao did not let the disgust of seeing those parasites wriggling prevent him from taking a big bite and eating the whole head of the infected fish. He described the sensation of eating those mutated loaches as slippery. It was very similar to the feeling of eating glass noodles. Surprisingly, that single bite fulfilled the conditions to complete his special task of devouring 10 mutant creatures in one go. He could not believe that it was that easy to get a blue treasure chest. The contents of the chest remain a mystery until the mermaid goddess opens it. This reward contains a skill called black iron scales. It was pretty much self-explanatory. The scales all over his body would be as hard as black iron. The transformation was fast and impressive. Finally, Lin Hao, the black koi, gained a color that matched his name. The transformation made him feel like all his scales had been plucked out, but it didn't hurt much. He just felt itchy all over. This reward he stumbled upon is quite a game changer. Still, it's just a skill that he needs to activate. His first transformation was quite exhausting as he was still not used to it. But with this new scale armor, self-preservation shouldn't be a big problem anymore. Speaking of self-preservation, it looks like his confidence will be tested once more. A bigger predator has been lurking around in the dark, watching his every move. Lin Hao immediately sensed the bloodlust coming from behind and hurriedly turned his attention to the source. It was the beast that he had some unfinished business with. The gigantic mutant snake beast of the depths. He did not expect that they'd meet each other again so soon. But it's here. The second round of their battle is about to commence. The mutant snake opened the battle with his terrifying lunge, launching at breakneck speeds. His jaw was open, expecting to swallow the little koi whole once again. As Lin Hao speedily retreated, his system warned him that the current opponent's combat power was slightly higher than the host's. Suddenly, he stopped retreating and turned his whole body to face the enemy. With a confident smile, the system presented him with a glimmer of hope. If the snake just has a slight advantage in combat power, then maybe it's time to show who's the real boss. This snake beast would certainly have him beat when it comes to intimidation tactics, but Lin Hao stood with unwavering conviction in the face of the mortifying roars. Using his newfound power, Lin Hao activated black iron scales, equipping his whole body with near indestructible armor. The snake beast foolishly charged forward to take a solid bite that could have ripped Lin Hao's body in half. But the monster was surprised at the sensation of pain spreading across his mouth instead. He chomped down even harder, but the black scales were just too tough to puncture. It came to a point where the snake's fangs were being shattered. The snake finally gave up after getting his own fangs ground down, as the bleeding from severe gum wounds spread in the water. This interaction convinced Lin Hao that he had the upper hand now. With supercharged energy, he primed his revenge attack, a powerful tail slam. The powerful clapback caught the snake by surprise. While it was still writhing in pain from its broken teeth, a solid blow landed on its face. The tail slam was forceful enough to launch the massive beast barreling down deeper. Still, this beast was truly a formidable one. It managed to catch itself from free falling too deep. Lin Hao was just trying to drive home the fact that a beast is a beast. They attack based on instinct, and they don't learn their lessons. Just like this stupid snake going for another one of its predictable lunge attacks. This time, Lin Hao decided to turn the tables around and take a bite out of the one that had gotten used to biting others. His enhanced razor-sharp teeth were no joke. They dug deep enough through the monster's tough scales and flesh to make the snake bleed again. Sensing that the enemy was about to launch another attack to get him to let go, the koi promptly called upon the power of the black iron scales, coating his body with armor. At this point, he was just enjoying making the beast that tried to digest him struggle. With this fight, he could finally display the fruits of his painstaking evolution. Realizing that the little koi was a bit too much to handle, the mutant snake started making a run for it. They started off with Lin Hao as the prey. It looks like they will be ending things with the little koi as the predator. He persisted with chasing and biting the mutant snake as much and as hard as he could. The deeper his razor-sharp teeth dug in, the more pain the retreating beast had to endure. With one final push, Lin Hao screamed his intention to kill this rival of his. As the mutant snake started to bleed from every orifice imaginable, that intention might be coming to fruition sooner rather than later. Lin Hao's biting force and tenacity resulted in him tearing off a huge chunk of the mutant snake's raw flesh, opening an even deeper wound than the last time. The beast must have realized that retreating and defending were useless. So, he extended his tongue to restrict the koi's movement once again. But this time, Lin Hao had upgraded scale strengthening and a powerful tail swing to use as a forceful escape plan. The tail swing was evidently different from the one before. This one enveloped Lin Hao's body with electrifying energy as a water vortex launched towards the monster. This vortex started wreaking havoc and wounding the snake mutant in multiple vital areas. The sequence of attacks ultimately culminated in a final dash that pierced through the snake's body, reminiscent of how Lin Hao survived their first encounter. Today, he wasn't just breaking the flesh open for the sake of escape. This one was for the sake of killing. Seeing the mutant snake plunge to its death from multiple deep cuts and wounds, Lin Hao's black iron scale armor started dissipating just in time. The system congratulated him for slaying the mutant red brocade snake. After the fight, the ground below displayed the intensity of the struggle. Craters upon craters stained in blood had been formed. Lin Hao carefully chewed on the flesh that he tore away from multiple parts of the mutant snake's body. He felt that the ending between their blood-soaked feud was quite anticlimactic since he finally got the bad taste of defeat and powerlessness out of his mouth. It was about time to get back what's rightfully his. After some off-screen feasting upon the corpse of the mutant red brocade snake, Lin Hao is now 500 evolution points richer than earlier. That's the highest number of points he has been rewarded for a single kill. The mermaid goddess explained that this is what happens when you challenge beyond your level and succeed. Besides the points, there are unexpected gains too. Lin Hao heard her say that and immediately turned with curiosity in his eyes. The mention of unexpected gains piqued his curiosity. The mermaid goddess did not waste any more words. It was better to let Lin Hao experience the process himself by calling on the power of the diamond gem lodged in his forehead. Miss Mermaid Goddess's system power coalesced right into Lin Hao's core in a beautiful light show. Suddenly, he was gone from the world of endless waters. The feeling was similar to the sensation of evolution. With this, the chapter ends here. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you did, hit that like button as today's like goal is 100 likes. Comment next part down below for the next part. Also, consider subscribing with the notification bell on to get notified as soon as a new video drops onto the channel. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching. Welcome back to my channel, everyone. Thank you all so much for your incredible support. It means the world to me. Last time, Lin Hao won his fight against the big snake and transformed into his human form. Now, in the next chapter, I can't wait to explore what happens next together. Whether you've been with us since the beginning or are just joining now, get ready for more intense action, new challenges, and some familiar faces as we dive back into the world we love. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any of the action. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the story. Lin Hao tested his human hands, closing them into fists with ease, and felt a surge of joy at the simple pleasure of their mobility. It was exhilarating to see his familiar limbs once more. Who wouldn't miss their hands in his situation? More importantly, he had regained his charming, handsome face, replacing the scaly, fish-like appearance he had grown accustomed to. Overcome with excitement, Lin Hao began shaking the mermaid goddess with enthusiasm. She quickly reassured him, though, that this transformation was only temporary. His enthusiasm faltered as he realized the bittersweet nature of receiving something so desired, only to have it taken away in a short time. The mermaid goddess emphasized the temporary nature of his human form. Despite the change, Lin Hao was still fundamentally a lowly fish. He would be able to converse with her alone, as no one else would hear his voice, and he lacked any combat abilities. Nonetheless, the chance to appear human, even briefly, was a significant consolation. Determined to make the most of this fleeting opportunity, Lin Hao planned to head to the shore. The mermaid goddess supported his plan but warned that if he left the water in his current state, he risked being arrested for indecent exposure. Fortunately, this issue was not insurmountable. Lin Hao swam carefully to the surface of the mystical dragon pond, mindful not to draw attention. He remembered a storage room near the shore, infrequently visited by others. Using a lily pad for cover, he stealthily emerged from the water, knowing that the storage room contained unclaimed lost items that could help him on his journey. This was huge. The room could basically act as his temporary dressing room. Taking some algae to use as temporary pants, he did his best to remain undetected by any prying human eyes while heading for the storage room door. Once he finally made sure that no one was watching the area, he dashed to the door. Luckily for him, the people in charge of this place don't use locks. After rummaging through the piles of lost and found boxes, he found a decent tracksuit that seemed clean enough. The only thing he took along with him to the surface was the recovered locket. He took the valuable trinket from the table after solving the problem of his nakedness and headed out of the storage room. Lin Hao found a cap lying around and swiped that too, just to remain inconspicuous since the sun was still out. Heading out, he was just starting to realize that since it's been a while since he's been on land, he's still trying to get used to walking with two legs again, instead of swimming with a tail and fins. In case you forgot, the perimeter of the dragon pond has been cordoned off, and armed forces have been deployed to monitor the area under suspicion of mutant activities. Lin Hao approached the restricted place and was immediately yelled at by the authorities. They thought that he was just a wandering tourist, unaware that the vicinity had been restricted. In his human form, he can't really talk with other humans using a human tongue. That's just one of the restrictions of his transformation imposed by the system and the mermaid goddess. One of Xiaoshue's loyal subordinates has been left to organize the base of operations around the pond. He had to field phone calls for his boss, the head of the research team, Luo Shui. Lin Hao might not be able to speak, but he was confident that he just heard the name of the love of his life being uttered by that guy. So, against the armed forces' orders, Lin Hao walked closer to the restricted area. The officers had to hold him down in a panic. The team leader's subordinate, this gruff captain, asked the unknown visitor for his identity and how he managed to get into this place. Lin Hao had to communicate with just gestures because of his missing voice. He had to animatedly point to the locket in his hands to let them know what was happening. He simply offered it to the captain to clear things up. The captain carefully took the trinket out of his hands. When he opened the locket, he saw the smudged photo of Lin Hao and team leader Luo. This thing must have belonged to his boss. The The captain asked if this voiceless young man knew the leader, and he promptly nodded his head. The captain smiled and thanked the young man on behalf of team leader Luo, then politely told Lin how to hurry home as there was still a secret mission ongoing in this pond. When a familiar voice full of conviction asking for the status of their clearing operation echoed out, the two men near the caution line had starkly different reactions. The captain immediately checked on the status of team leader Luo's business with the west side of the city, while Lin Hao tried his best to obscure his face with the cap. He knew that he couldn't meet Xiao Shui yet. He can't speak, and the dragon team is investigating mutant creatures. But the biggest problem of all is the unknown limited duration of his human form. Fortunately, the captain was a man of his word. He handed the locket to his boss and told her that it was found by a young man who fervently asked for the trinket to be handed back to its owner. Upon seeing this object that she thought was forever lost, Xiao Shui was more than just shocked. Then she started demanding the identity of the young man who retrieved the locket. The captain, clueless as to what's happening, just pointed at the guy behind him. But Lin Hao had long since run away from the area in fear of making the situation more complicated. The captain reckoned that the young man must have just been a tourist loitering around the area. Just getting the pocket watch should already be good news. She agreed and urged her subordinate to get back to work. But deep inside, team leader Luo had an inkling of suspicion that Lin Hao must have retrieved this watch. She's still holding on to the possibility that the love of her life is still alive. And her instincts were spot on. Lin Hao ran away from the restricted area and hid behind some thick bushes from afar. He inwardly apologized to his girl, for they couldn't meet just yet. When the time was right, he promised to explain everything clearly. It looked like his decision to get out of that place was the right one, as the system was now spamming him with warning prompts about how his human form time was about to end soon. Lin Hao quickly dashed back into the water before the timer ran down to 0. Everything that has happened so far is beyond understanding. Whether as a human or a fish, he can't live aimlessly anymore. It's time to lock in. His brief time back on the surface presents that it's possible for him to evolve into a proper human form. His core evolution isn't fixed, and the possibility of transformation is virtually endless. Recalling the event that plunged him into his current bizarre situation, Lin Hao steeled his resolve to train and evolve properly. He needs to find out what exactly happened on that cursed day. Far away from the pond, a lone skyscraper stood in the middle of the city. It's the renowned Longyin Research Center. In one of the most secure rooms of the facility, someone was making a life-altering decision. Luo Shui was handing in her application form to apply as a full-time field agent, much to her superior's disagreement. She assured the man wearing a lab coat she called Old Zhang that she had thought this decision through for a long time. But her application included the request to inject high-concentration GT virus into her system, a procedure that carries massive risks. Since Luo Shui has been widely regarded as an expert researcher, there's really no need for her to take this kind of risk. But she sees things differently. She wanted Old Zhang to understand that her transfer to the action team, full-time as a field agent, would be more conducive to her research. The old man had worked with this headstrong lady for a long time and knew what she was actually thinking. He knew that she wanted to go out there in the anomaly sites for the sake of her missing lover, Lin Hao. But the whole world is facing a major crisis right now. This is hardly the time for personal feelings to get involved. They need to keep their priorities straight and understand the situation. She assured Old Zhang that her decision was not just for Lin Hao. One of their long-running problems is that the research team can never get to anomalous scenes in time, causing a lot of relevant information about mutant creatures to be lost and missed. If she could join the action team in a full-time role, it might lead to new breakthroughs in their research about these bizarre phenomena. Old Zhang sighed in defeat. She made a very strong case for approval of her application. So, the old man took the form with a heavy heart and approved her request for transfer. Back in the Dragon Pond, Lin Hao is currently experiencing a similar transition in life. Since there's nothing new to devour in the shallow waters, it's about time for him to venture into the dark depths. The mermaid goddess asked him if he was sure about this significant decision. There are many unknown creatures in the deep waters. The danger levels are in a different league. Lin Hao answered by diving deep into the mouth of the dark cavern leading to the depths. The mermaid goddess was right about the dangers that this place entails, but he'll still give it a shot. Besides, if he can't fight the dangers, he can always run. Right? In the dark and cold depths of the mystical dragon pond, no one can hear you scream. The menacing monsters lurking in the dark waters circle around the area, looking for their next prey. Within the concealment of rock formations, Lin Hao hid while munching on weaker targets. The mermaid goddess teased him for being so excited to explore the deep waters, only to continue hiding in safety. He argued that this was called a tactical retreat, so he could explore safely. It was a very effective method, too. It got him enough evolution points to enter the next stage. After all, this new level brought about a qualitative change within his physical form. Upon opening his eyes, he thought they were playing tricks on him. It felt like someone just turned on the lights underwater for the first time. That was because he had just evolved night vision. At level 8, 5 meters long, and 101 pounds, he finally entered the double-digit combat power club, reaching 10 points. Along with night vision and a jump in strength, he also unlocked the map setting. Fiddling with the option to accept the map, he wondered if he could use it for teleportation like in RPG games. It took on the form of an ancient scroll detailing the topography of Longyin City in vivid detail. Most of the map naturally showed rivers. Prominent among them was the location of the Hanjue River north of the Dragon King Temple, about 5 kilometers away from his current spot. Aside from that, there was another river about 8 kilometers away. A body of water right outside the Longyin chemical plant. Sure, he could stare at this map and know the location of relevant spots. But he was still stuck in the mystical dragon pond. Thankfully, the system answered his prayers and gave him the option to teleport for a duration of 1 hour. He had commented about teleportation earlier as a joke, but the system really gave him an OP ability. There were still a lot of unknowns, but there was no point in worrying too much when he could just try it out first. Upon confirming the place he wanted to jump into, Lin Hao's body started glitching and disintegrating pixel by pixel. His fragmented body illuminated the water as every shard swiftly entered the ancient manifestation of his map. The next thing you know, he was already in a different body of water, a bay that surrounded the metropolis. The teleportation was a success. Of course, this also meant that he had just unlocked a whole new dining table of diverse seafood meals. Without wasting another second, Lin Hao's greedy self was already swooping in left and right, trying to cram as much fish as he could into his mouth. These ones tasted so much better than scavenger fish. His antics attracted the attention of other aquatic lives that had some semblance of intelligence too. But standing out in this peaceful place hardly mattered for someone with Lin Hao's strength and intelligence. Not only were these adult grass carps better tasting, they had a healthy population and they also gave a lot more evolution points at 90 a pop. That was basically equivalent to 3 bad-tasting scavenger fish. He suddenly reconsidered the kind of miserable life he was living in the mystical dragon pond, where his diet consisted of apple snails and scavenger fish. It had been so long since he had such good meat. But with new territory came a new threat to safety. Of course, a significant body of water would have a few big dogs in it. The first one Lin Hao saw was a giant snake lounging around and minding its own business. Just the sight of this snake was enough to get him a little mad. Then came another one of the heavyweights of the Hanjue River. The size of the beast made him do a double take. He estimated that this freaky catfish was about 2 meters long. Even though he was confident in his current combat prowess, the size of that big boy was still worrying. However, Lin Hao also noticed that the system did not sound any alarms. That must mean that the giant catfish had a combat power level similar to his. Maybe it was even weaker than him. Whichever one it was, seeing a mutated creature out in the open was rare, and he should just go for it. Devouring this thing would undoubtedly give him a ton of evolution points. Maybe it would drop enough to level him up in one go. So Lin Hao tightened up and swam forward, aiming for the back of the catfish. His sneak attack would have been a biting success had it not been for the catfish's skin being so strangely slippery. Failing to deal any damage and getting slime all over his teeth, Lin Hao was smacked away by the catfish's tail. If this had happened before, he would have been done with one smack. But he was unharmed, which confirmed that the enemy's combat power was low as hell. Activating fire scales, Lin Hao smiled and entered overdrive, pushing his speed to the highest degree for a second strike. Using his body and momentum, he was able to stop the catfish from retreating elsewhere, smacking it against the sea floor. The bump left some severe bruising and instilled a primal fear in the fish's mind. It tried to be brave, turning around and taking a bite out of the smaller fish, trying to exploit the glaring size difference. But Lin Hao's nearly indestructible scales were just too much to deal with. It nearly crushed the catfish's teeth, making its gums bleed. While writhing in pain, the poor fool suffered a firm tail slap to the belly. Lin Hao could not help but grin like an idiot. Pleased with his performance thus far, he was confident that this was nothing but a sure kill. But he might have underestimated the enemy's instincts. In a fight-or-flight situation, the catfish chose the latter and swam away with all its might. Infuriated, Lin Hao refused to let the bastard run away scot-free after all his perfect moves. Unfortunately for him, the system handed down the warning that his teleportation time limit had been reached, and he would be returned to mystical Dragon Pond in 3 seconds. At the same time, he sensed an ominous presence coming from behind. As the teleportation countdown ticked, he saw a humanoid figure bathed in an evil light. Lin Hao felt like he was being stared down by an ancient presence with dark thoughts. The humanoid maintained its blank face, while the koi fish slowly came to the realization that he had already felt the sensation he was feeling right now. This suffocating sense of overbearing dominance felt a lot like the aura of that monster who killed him in Lintian City before. Going by simple logic, this must mean that Longyuan City is in grave danger. Even if he wanted to do something about it, the forced teleportation was not going to let him stay a minute longer. Back in the mystical Dragon Pond, he pondered why that disgusting presence felt so familiar. The mermaid goddess urged him to just go back and take a closer look once more. Presented with an idea, Lin Hao asked how he could even return to that place to investigate. She gave him 2 reasonable options. He could either wait at the Dragon Pond until the teleportation went off cooldown sometime tomorrow, or he could just go out of the water and walk on foot with the temporary human form. Of course, with average human speed, it was highly likely that he would just turn back into a little koi fish after reaching Coldwater River 5 kilometers away. There, he would have to wait until the next day to come back. Carefully considering the choices presented in front of him, Lin Hao felt partial to the human plan. As he could not afford to waste time, he needed to get out of the water and check what was happening near the coast of Longyuan City. Lin Hao swam up to the pond's surface and happened to overhear a conversation between the captain and Xiao Shui. They were talking about her decision to apply as a field agent and her assignment to a different location. She was almost finished handing over her remaining work as team leader, so she would be set to leave tomorrow. Hearing this crazy plan, Lin Hao became worried and curious as to where Xiao Shui was going. The captain remarked that from the first day old Zhang brought this strong-willed woman into the dragon team, he knew that Luo Shui would not just be a lab rat. Content with dissecting mutated creatures in a controlled environment, she admitted that she got excited when she found out a national-level research unit wanted her on the roster. To the first time she saw the words, Washa Dragon Team, she felt a sense of mission bigger than life itself. But the more secrets she learned, the harder it was to keep going with her original intention. Lighting up a cigarette, the captain retorted that everything has 2 sides. Mutated creatures pose a massive threat to public safety, but the GT virus they carry is not entirely useless to humanity. Some special action team members have been injected with small amounts of this stuff to enhance their physical strength and overall combat ability. But to truly break human limits, one can only choose to inject a high concentration dose of this mysterious GT virus. The captain held team leader Luo by the shoulder, his tone becoming more serious. As he walked away, he praised her for being a real warrior. He would not say much more, and he would not oppose her decisions. He just hoped she would be safe when everything was said and done. Luo Xiao promised that she would do her best to survive. Someone was waiting for her after all. She sincerely believed that Lin Hao was still out there, and she was not wrong. He was closer than she could ever imagine. Filled with uncertainty, Luo Shui prayed for everything to go smoothly in the future. With cold determination, Lin Hao emerged from the water, took on the temporary form of a human, and swiped some clothes off the nearby shed before heading out. He was thinking about the fact that his girl joined the Dragon Team, a hidden facet of the government to secretly research mutated creatures. He didn't really mind the secrecy of it all. He was just worried about the dangers of her job. Having heard that tidbit about mutated creatures carrying something called the GT virus, he wondered if he also carried that thing inside his body. Suddenly, the mermaid goddess manifested out in the open field. She came to gently remind him that his human form only lasts for 40 minutes, so time is of the essence. He couldn't afford to turn into a fish in the middle of a grassy field now. The sprint towards the nearest body of water was torturous, but he managed to set foot on the coast before the time was up. Huffing and puffing for air, he was reminded that he had not run so intensely on land for quite some time now. Even the sensation of having feet felt like a feeling from a past life. He was not too far off with that observation. His days as a human really were from his past life. Lin Hao jumped into the water as the transformation clock ticked down to the last second. Upon diving down below, he returned to his fish form and felt that it was a bit absurd now that he actually felt a lot more comfortable moving and breathing in the water than on land. As soon as he reached the spot where crucian carps were lounging around, he immediately acted like a menace and devoured multiple prey in succession. The all-you-can-eat buffet even included some poor freshwater snails that only gave 5 evolution points. His eyes shone bright, satisfied with the easy and hassle-free buffet right before him. Exploring the foreign waters, he noticed that there was an area where schools of fish did not dare to come near. That must mean that a big guy was slumbering around, stinking up the joint. Near the floor, the water was so murky that something should be going on inside all the mess. Just as he thought, the big guy was hiding in the murk. It was waiting for an unwitting victim to swim a little too close and become an easy snack. Thankfully, Lin Hao clocked the trick a while ago and was able to dodge it out of the way promptly. He finally found the giant catfish he was beefing with earlier. It swam up, exiting the murky spot with relentless aggression. Lin Hao felt a sinister aura coming off the beast. It was subtle and horrifyingly dark. He could instantly feel that something was not right. This catfish was not so murderous before. It was just a big loser that ran at the first sign of trouble. But now, it was taking on a more aggressive role. Still, Lin Hao was confident with his own arsenal, and he would gladly welcome the beast to a grudge match. He couldn't let that plan to ambush him pass without consequences. Ramping up his speed, he knew that finishing this quickly was a must. He could still feel the presence of that disgusting monster that sent a chill down his spine nearby just now. The koi and the catfish ramped up their charge against one another. It had become a game of chicken to see who would give way first. At the last second, Lin Hao swiftly turned his body around to wag his tail at a destructive level of acceleration. He made that big body take the powerful tail slap right in the face. Suffering from the opening attack, the giant catfish looked dazed and confused. This would be an excellent opportunity to finish the job once and for all. So, Lin Hao jumped in, launched himself at the belly of the beast, and chomped on that flesh until the slippery slime came off. The goo made it hard for him to get a decent grip using his razor-sharp teeth. But he made it work. His tenacious bite eventually irritated the catfish's belly area. He held on for so long that the slime finally started drying up, making it easier to puncture through the thick flesh. This savage attack might actually work. Feeling that he had enough grip to inflict some severe damage, Lin Hao tore a decent chunk of the monster's flesh, opening a massive gash where the bleeding immediately flared up. Lin Hao paused to chew on the meat while the monster bled out and found it surprisingly tasty. The kill was done just like that. If it weren't for the slime being such a nuisance, killing the catfish would have been a lot easier. But he still couldn't get over the weirdness of how aggressive the monster had suddenly become compared to their first encounter. Lin Hao swam after the falling corpse, excited to dig in and find out how many evolution points he could get. He even wondered if cooking the meat would make it better. Every time he chewed on the fish meat, his satisfied smile deepened. By the time he was done, the catfish had already been picked clean to the bone. If he were to describe the taste, it was a lot like chicken. The system then rewarded him with 3,000 evolution points for devouring the mutated catfish wholly. With that, Lin Hao reached level 9 and 14 points on combat power. With another task completed, he was beaming with joy of accomplishment. Suddenly, he heard some garbled voices talking about how high the fish population was in this spot. It sounded like they intended to do some illegal electrocution to get everything in one go. Curious, Lin Hao poked his head to the surface and saw 3 men organizing their equipment to go electrofishing in the middle of the night. This would probably wipe out his free all-you-can-eat buffet. One of the men saw Lin Hao poking his head up to the surface, and the greedy fishermen immediately set their eyes on the big fish. Lin Hao was not going to let himself get captured and sold by these idiots, though. He dove down for a second, gathered enough momentum, and then jumped out with his razor-sharp teeth in full display, attacking the fisherman. Seeing his size and fearsome form, the 3 nearly pissed their pants in fear. Frozen in place, not daring to move, Lin Hao just showed them a little horror show, then jumped right back into the water. The 3 swiftly retreated to wherever they came from, screaming for their mommies. If there's one thing praiseworthy about the men, they sure were fast runners. The mermaid goddess teased that Lin Hao was definitely done for now. Those men would surely notify the dragon team, and their task force would target the mutated koi. He couldn't believe he had forgotten something that important. With this, the chapter ends here. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you did, hit that like button as today's like goal is 100 likes. Comment next part down below for the next part. Also, consider subscribing with the notification bell on to get notified as soon as a new video drops onto the channel. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching.